positioning only, I'm going to focus on musculoskeletal imaging. I'm not going into the techniques. So when it comes to musculoskeletal imaging, comfort, patient comfort is an important factor. Shoulder, most of the times we get artifacts because of the abdomen. When you place the arm on their abdomen, you get, the patient will say, nah, I've never moved, I'm cooperating well, but then the images will be blurred. So for that, you need to see that the arms are supported with pads like this and in supination. So this is how you do. For an elbow, you could either use a flex coil or you could do a loop coil, but you need to know how you need to plan sections on your axial and on your sagittals. But if at all you are suspecting a biceps pathology, see, this is the coil, the surface coil. You need to position the patient in a Superman position like this, and you need to plan sections parallel to the humerus. So this much if you know in elbow, looking at the pathology, that should be fine. Okay. Knee joint, yes. When it comes to musculoskeletal, the most commonest examination will be the shoulder and the knee joint. Okay, so when you're doing knee joint, now there's no point stretching the leg or extending the leg when you're positioning, because you need to appreciate the ACL and PCL in a single slice. For that, you need to give about 5 degrees flexion. Just place a small pad beneath the knee and you will be able to achieve this result. And when suppose you're suspecting an ACL pathology, what you need to do is, on the sagittal, you will be able to see the ACL fine. So if you're suspecting an ACL tear or any ACL pathology, see that you do oblique coronals, and your oblique coronals, you will have to plan along the ACL so that you will be getting this sort of a coronal image with a better appreciation of the delineation of the ACL. If they're asking you oblique sagittal, then plan on this coronal image along the ACL. You will be able to demonstrate the ACL on a sagittal better. Okay, the most commonest problem artifact that you come across in knee joint will be a magic angle artifact. That is because it's aligned, the tendons and the collagens, they lie at 55 degrees to the main magnetic field. So this is this artifact can be overcome if you do the same sagittal section in a T2 FRFSE. So you can see that there is an artifact with the patellar tendon. You can see some hyperintensity mimicking like a pathology, but actually it's a magic angle artifact. So just repeat it with high resolution FRFSE. You will be able to overcome the artifact. Hip joints, every institute has its own protocols, like what T1, what T2, what's to be done. But if your indication is to rule out ephemeroarticular impingement, please do oblique axial. They also call it as a Swiss axial. So you need to take the coronal image, plan oblique axials running along the neck and the head of the femur. So that is very, very important to demonstrate the impingement. Okay, a few tips for cardiac MRI. The gating is very, very important. Some institutions, some machines have 4 leads, some machines have 3 leads. Look at the monitor, see if you're getting a uniform wave pattern. Now, that uniform wave pattern, the trace, you need to see, how do you appreciate whether the trace or the ECG trace is correct? You need to see whether the PQRST complexes are spaced evenly apart, whether the R wave is significantly larger than the T wave, and it has to have, the PQRST complex has to have a good amplitude. Okay, if the trace is unsatisfactory, the commonest elevation will be the T wave elevation. The commonest problem that you will come across is the T wave elevation. So that the system cannot distinguish from an R wave, which is very, very important when you're doing a cardiac MRI, because the triggering happens only when it detects an R wave. You have something called the trigger window and the trigger delay. So you need to check your ECG trace before beginning the examination. If you're having problem with the ECG leads, you can go for optional pulse gating. But then the technique, you need to have a difference of 150 milliseconds in your TR. So that is only one factor that you need to keep in mind. And if that's what, as I said, breath hold is a real challenge when it comes to cardiac MRI. So you need to increase signal averages. In patients with arrhythmia, try to go for triggering the sequences rather than just loading it manually. Filming is very, very important. Okay, and when it comes to the post contrast, myocardial viability, post contrast, you need to choose the TI, which is the appropriate TI where the myocardium signals are nulled completely. So you need to do with varying the TI of about 10 milliseconds, 150, 170, 180. But instead, if you have a PSIR imaging, then you can easily go for that, because it gives you the TI scouts and different TIs. You can choose the correct TI there. Okay. And one important factor when you're doing left ventricle pathology is left ventricle outflow tract view. So this is how you get. What you can do is you can actually increase the, if the patient is having, arrhythmia, you can increase the, if the patient's heart rate is more, you can reduce the phases. If the heart rate is less, you can increase the phases. Okay, so that is one thing that you need to keep in mind when you're doing a cardiac MRI. And we have come to the end of it. We'll just conclude with concerns related to contrast media. When it comes to contrast administrations, for example, a simple brain examination, there are different ways that you give contrast. You could either give it as a hand injection, for example, they're suspecting a meningitis or an encephalitis, or if they're suspecting a vascular malformation, you can go for tricks, okay, with multiple phases where arterial, venous, and capillary phase that you capture, or if it's a tumor, an acute stroke, or follow-up cases, and in that cases, you need to go for a perfusion. But you should decide and you should coordinate with the radiologist as to what contrast examination is required. Okay, and so, okay, what contrast do I give? Now, there are 3 different classifications, group 1, group 2, and group 3. So you have the gadodiamide, gadopentate dimeglumine, that is Magnavist, which is, so you have 2 things in common. That is, when it comes to contrast, you have something called linear, which is linear or macrocyclic based on the molecular structure. And then based on the charge, you have it as either non-ionic or ionic. So preferable will be a macrocyclic because the gadolinium is trapped between oxygen and nitrogen and it will not escape into the bloodstream. So the free cellular uptake of gadolinium will not happen. So preferable will be a macrocyclic, but then you'll have to interact with your radiologist as to what contrast you need to give. But the most preferable will be group 3. We don't have enough literature to state whether it is safe or not, but group 2 is safe when it comes. So you need to, better to have multi-hands, Gadovest, Dotarem, and Clariscan. That is gadobenate dimeglumine, gadobutrol, gadoterate meglumine, and gadoteric acid. Now, why? Because I'm saying all this is GBCAs are associated with something called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis. So you need to know whether group 1 is safe or group 2 is safe or group 3 is safe. Always clarify it with your radiologist. Suppose you have the option of 2 different agents that you have with you. If at all you're doing an angiogram, you can go for, gadobenate dimeglumine. This is also known as multi-hands because it stays in the vascular bed for a prolonged time, giving you enough time for you to image the complete region of interest. So if you have that option, you can go for multi-hands, right? And targeted. Of course, if they're suspecting a liver lesion, again, you can go for Ferredex or multi-hands. Ferredex is a T2 star agent, and of course, it is not available here. So you can instead go for multi-hands because this multi-hands, there is about 5 to 10% which is excreted by the liver. So there will be, this contrast will stay in the liver or it's taken up by the hepatocytes. You need to have this, when I say targeted contrast agents, it stays in your region of interest for a longer duration in higher concentration. So that is more important. So if you're specifically looking for a spleen or liver pathology, you can opt for the multi-hands because it will tell you it will easily enter the reticuloendothelial system, and through the phagocytes, it provides selective access to the liver, the spleen, the lymph nodes, and the bone marrow. So you need to know which is preferable where. Okay. And we'll see what will be done in case of a pregnant lady who requires contrast. Then in the case of a lactating woman, what will you do if you need to give contrast?
It's a very small amount of contrast only going to excrete through breast milk. So it is safer for the mother to continue her breastfeed. In case if she hesitate or have any fear in giving breastfeed, we can suggest her like extract and store breast milk. Then she can give after 24 hours. She can feed after 24 hours.
Yes. So whenever there's a lactating woman who needs to give contrast, you give them the option. So she can feed the child, go ahead with the contrast examination. Or you can say like there's no harm, she can continue breastfeeding even after the contrast administration. However, if the mother is still apprehensive, not convinced, give her the option of extracting and storing the breast milk. But then you can tell her to refrain breastfeeding only for 24 hours. That's more than enough because it's going to be completely eliminated from the system. What if it is a pregnant woman? So in case of pregnant women, what will you do if there's a necessity to do contrast MRI for a 32-year-old pregnant woman?
Any contrast studies, we'll consult our radiologist before giving the contrast. Coming to the pregnant woman, first we'll ask them if the contrast is necessary. Then we'll go for group 2 contrast agents, compared to group 1 and group 3 contrast agents as per the ACR guidelines.
Yes, as per the ACR guidelines, group 2 is safe in pregnancy. Okay. So I'm concluding with little bit of safety. All the technologists should be aware with these signages, which are MR safe instruments or equipments that can be taken inside, which are MR unsafe that have to be avoided. It should not be taken inside. And there are some appliances that are MR conditional. That is, whenever necessity arises, you can go inside, right? So let me conclude. Technologists, you should be aware with your standard tailor-made protocols in your institution. You should know how to juggle the parameters to give optimal image quality. Also, you should be able to perform scans within reasonable time limits and increase the throughput. You should know where to modify your positioning techniques or your planning techniques, and you should be able to provide good results. Complete the post-processing and make your radiologist job easy for easy interpretation. Complete it with documentation with annotations, appropriate annotations, and see that the images are archived in packs for future retrieval.